Do you own a motorcycle? Well, I'm sure you've ridden on the back of one. And if you have, you know what On Any Sunday's all about. It's about motorcycles and motorcycle racing. The man who made Endless Summer a few years ago, you know the film on surfing, right? Has just made a new film. Bruce Brown made On Any Sunday, and he's got some interesting things to say about motorcycle racing. Bruce, first of all, is a really good film.
Thank you, thank you.
Bruce, you're obviously an expert. What kind of different kinds of motorcycle racing are there? I mean, the major kinds.
Well, one of the most popular now, which is rather new in the U.S., maybe 5 years it was introduced, 5 years ago, motocross. And we show the flat track racing of various types, professional racing. In Southern California, desert racing is popular. There's deserts there.
Right.
And thousands of people race in the desert. Then there's a lot of types that aren't too popular because of either the machinery or the facilities, like ice racing, where they use spiked tires and race on frozen tracks, and that's done mainly in Canada.
Right. I doubt if they do much in Southern California, right?
Right, it's a little hard to do it there.
By and large, Bruce, what kind of people race?
Well, all kinds of people. You really can't categorize them. They're mostly outdoor people, active people, people that are into some kind of sports.
Right. Well, it's mostly young people, right? Or does old-timers get into it once in a while?
Depends on the kind of racing. Desert racing, for instance, I'd say the majority of them are older. A lot of the younger kids are getting into it and doing very well. Motocross, on the other hand, is mostly young. And boy, you get out there and some 14-year-old kid comes by like you're standing still. You know, they're physically in super shape. They don't seem to get very tired.
Right.
They have no fear. And so motocross, you see, I think there's a kid in California that's 13 years old, and he beats almost everybody. It's unbelievable.
What's the youngest racer you've seen, Bruce?
Well, they have mini bike races out there too, where there's 8, 9-year-old kids that race on a little motorcycle, little tracks. I've seen a 12-year-old boy at Daytona Beach, Florida, on the banked oval where where the big bikes go 160, and he was on a smaller bike, probably going 130.
Wow.
But, boy, he takes his helmet off, and you think, holy smokes, look at that guy.
Well, tell me, Bruce, any idea of the total number of people who race?
Probably, there's, I think, 4 or 5 million people that ride bikes. A lot of them ride off the road, or what we call cow trailing.
Right.
And actual competitors, there's really no figure. I imagine 1 million or something like that.
Well, you mentioned briefly about the desert races out in Southern California. The biggest ones I know are held in the Mojave Desert. About how many cycles compete out there?
Well, a small start for a desert race would be 500 or 600. And one of the biggest starts was just a few months ago on a race that goes from Barstow to Las Vegas, 160 miles.
Right.
Off the road. And I think there was 2,400 started all at once. It was quite a sight.
I bet it was. For about how long did the starting line stretch, Bruce?
Anywhere from 1 mile to 2 miles.
Boy, what a sight that must have been. Bruce, the October issue of Reader's Digest talks about trouble in the Mojave. Now, what do you think ecologically happens to the Mojave when 2,400 bikes race across it?
Well, that is interesting, because I read a review and some critic said everybody knows that those motorcycles destroy the desert. Well, A, I'm sure he's never seen the Mojave Desert. B, I know he's never seen a motorcycle race in the desert. And C, if he'd come out to the desert after one rainstorm in the winter, he'd find that, every winter storm changes the face of the desert more than every motorcycle race they've ever had. And that their courses are laid out in cooperation with the Bureau of Land Management. So if there is any area that where there's a delicate balance, they don't run through there.
Right.
They run through certain areas, and many of the desert races run through like sand washes, which in the winter after rain are water washes. And you go out in the desert, and one day, and come out after the rain, there'll be a 40-foot ditch where there was flat desert. So
right.
You could take every motorcycle in the United States and run around the Mojave Desert, avoiding certain areas, and they could do less damage than one rainstorm. And the rains happen every year.
Well, Bruce, I understand there are even some girls in it in the Mojave races. Is that true?
There's a group of girls that race out there. They call themselves the Desert Daisies, and they have a club, and they go out and every weekend they race, and some of them are really good.
Think other girls might get into it later?
I think so. Still 98% are men, but there There's quite a few girls do it, even getting into the scrambles racing sometimes and track racing, and some of them do really well.
Bruce, here's a tough question for you. What's the toughest bike you've ever seen?
I think I've never ridden it like some of the drag racing bikes, which
Right.
have to be like rockets, you know,
Uh-huh.
and they're just designed to go straight, hopefully. But some of the big 400, 500 cc motocross machines, that two-stroke engine, and
Right.
boy, you know, tape those
Yeah.
things on a little bit, and they're really whew, gives you a real thrill.
Quite a one, I'm sure. Bruce, what's the story on motocross racing? Why is it so popular now?
Well, it doesn't take a lot of space. First of all, with a lot of places in the country, there's not a lot of space. They can lay a course out in a field, and it's a physically demanding sport, very much so. I think they've made scientific tests and taped electrodes on muscles and respirators and whatnot, and it was the second most physically demanding sport in the world.
Exactly what is motocross racing?
It's a race over tremendously difficult terrain, jumps and bumps and holes and rocks and mud, whatever. The rougher the better, and the race usually lasts for like 30 minutes, and whoever's ahead after 30 minutes is the winner. And to decide the winner is usually 3 heats, or you have to compete 3 different races during the day, and at the end of the day, you know you've done something. You know?
Right, right. Bruce, how much film did you shoot for the picture?
About 150 hours worth.
Well, how do you cut that down to a 2-hour movie?
With a pair of scissors. Just really, you know, you're trying to show things. We aren't really showing races per se. In other words, as far as like showing a whole race of here goes Charlie and watching him for 20 laps. We're just mainly trying to show what it's like to ride motocross, or what flat track racing is like. And we show very few complete races. You know, we show you little bits and pieces here and there. But it's a difficult thing to film to get the action you want. So consequently, we had to shoot a tremendous amount of film to get the shots we wanted.
Right. The closing shot of the film shows 3 good friends riding their bikes together. It was really a beautiful shot. Do you think that more than racing is what bikes are all about?
I think so, and that was really the point of the ending part of the film. Was all competition aside, there's something about getting on a motorcycle with your friends, go for a ride in the open country through the fields and whatnot, that can really only be shared by someone who's done it, and trying to show just the pure joy and happiness of getting on a motorcycle and doing that.
Right.
And that is really kind of where it's at.
Bruce, I run a big Triumph, and I know just what you mean. Thank you, Bruce Brown. It's really been good talking to you.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
This is Ronnie Grant.
On any Sunday, stretching out